Are you asking yourself what has happened to America? I well remember a speech Nikita Khrushchev made when he visited America in the late 50s. We will take America without firing a shot. We will bury you. He said we can't expect the American people to jump from capitalism to communism, but we can assist their elected leaders in giving them small doses of socialism until they awaken one day to find that they have communism. We do not have to invade the United States. We will destroy you from within. The following quotes are from Kenneth Goff's Brainwashing, the Russian textbook on psychopolitics. Goff had been a card-carrying communist from Englewood, Colorado. After seeing with alarm what was happening to America, he left the party and voluntarily appeared before the Un-American Activities Committee with this information and this advice. This manual of the Communist Party should be in the hands of every loyal American, that they may be alerted to the fact that it is not always by armies and guns that a nation is conquered. They said, we will destroy patriotism. If we could effectively kill the national pride and patriotism of just one generation, we will have won that country. Therefore, there must be continual propaganda abroad to undermine the loyalty of the citizens in general and the teenager in particular. They said, we will destroy America's heritage. Continual and constant degradation of national leaders, national institutions, national practices, and national heroes must be systematically carried out by attacking the character and morals of man himself, and by bringing about through contamination of youth a general degraded feeling. Command of the populace is facilitated to a very marked degree. History is being rewritten by teachers, books, movies, television, and the internet. The Library of Congress has many original books locked away from the public. What is included in textbooks is so watered down that it is boring, incomplete, and often incorrect. The Russian textbook continues. We will destroy the church. As it seems in foreign nations that the church is the most ennobling influence, each and every branch and activity of each and every church must, one way or another, be discredited. Religion must become unfashionable by demonstrating broadly through psychopolitical indoctrination that the soul is non-existent and that man is an animal. Religion must be made synonymous with neuroses and psychoses. The American Civil Liberties Union Agenda, Policy Number 81, calls for a permanent ban on displays of the nativity scene and the menorah on public property. Policy Number 84 calls for the removal of "under God" from the Pledge of Allegiance and the republic for which it stands. Policy Number 92 calls for an end to tax exemptions for all churches and synagogues. In Louisiana, attorneys with the ACLU demanded jail time for any person who prayed in a manner they disapproved of. In South Carolina and Virginia, the ACLU used the threat of a lawsuit against local government entities to silence prayers in Jesus' name. They said we will distort man's view of himself. The first thing to be degraded in any nation is the state of man himself. Nations which have high ethical tone are difficult to conquer. He must think of himself as an animal, capable only of animalistic reactions. It is 1925, Dayton, Tennessee. The so-called monkey trial begins with John Thomas Scopes, a young high school science teacher accused of teaching evolution in violation of a Tennessee state law. They had made it a misdemeanor punishable by a fine to teach any theory that denies the story of the divine creation of man as taught in the Bible. With local businessman George Rapalje, Scopes had conspired to get charged with this violation, and after his arrest, the pair enlisted the aid of the American Civil Liberties Union. The great attorney Clarence Darrow agreed to join them. William Jennings Bryan, the three-time Democratic presidential candidate and a fundamentalist hero, volunteered to assist in the prosecution. The stage was set for one of the most famous trials in U.S. history. Darrow, however, made Bryan the scapegoat and humiliated him on the courthouse grounds, denying him the opportunity to deliver the closing speech. After 8 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned with the guilty verdict. They ordered Scopes to pay a fine of $100. Although Brian had won the case, he had been publicly humiliated and his fundamentalist beliefs had been disgraced. Most people believe that Darrow and evolution won. They did not. Nevertheless, the schools have been indoctrinating our children with the theory of evolution ever since. The Russian textbook continues. All lands are governed by the few and only pretend to consult with the many. It is no different in America. The petty official, the maker of laws alike, can be made to believe the worst. It is not necessary to convince the masses. It is only necessary to work incessantly upon the official, using personal defamations, wild lies, false evidences, and constant propaganda to make him fight for you. The master of liars, the American Civil Liberties Union, by promoting sexual perversion and abortion and at the same time stripping Bibles, prayer, and the Ten Commandments from our schools and courthouses, has contributed massively to the decline of America. The ACLU was founded on January 12, 1920. All of the three ACLU founders later became prominent leaders of the Communist Party USA. In 1935, Roger Baldwin, the ACLU's longtime director, voiced his views. I am for socialism, disarmament, and ultimately for abolishing the state itself. I see the social ownership of property, the abolition of the property class, and the control of those who produce wealth. Communism is the goal. The ACLU started the lie that the courts have reinforced, that there is a wall of separation between religion and government in the Constitution. We will deceive the children. Under the saccharine guise of assistance to them, rigorous child labor laws are the best means to deny the child any right in the society. By refusing to let him earn, by forcing him into unwanted dependence upon a grudging parent, by making certain in other channels that the parent is never in other than economic stress, the child can be driven in his teens into revolt, and delinquency will ensue. The government even recently tried to make a law that children could not work on their family farms, but enough people found out about it and started raising a fuss, so they backed down. We will destroy your youth by making readily available drugs of various kinds, by giving the teenager alcohol, by praising his wildness, by stimulating him with sex literature and advertising to him or her practices as taught at the sex pole, sexual politics school. The psychopolitical operator can create the necessary attitude of chaos, idleness, and worthlessness, into which can then be cast the solution which will give the teenager complete freedom everywhere: communism. Do these not sound familiar? Stimulating the teenager with sex literature? In Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition 2002, the Supreme Court overturned an act of Congress, the Child Pornography Protection Act, on the grounds that prohibiting computer-generated images of children engaging in sex acts was an overly broad definition of pornography and a violation of the First Amendment. ACLU Agenda Policy Number 210 calls for the legalization of all narcotics, including crack and angel dust, contending the introduction of substances into one's own body is a civil liberty. We will corrupt campaigns to improve youth. It is the communist campaign to produce in youth delinquency, addiction, drunkenness, and sexual promiscuity. So any movements to improve youth should be invaded and corrupted. The ACLU went to court to force the Boy Scouts of America to accept scout leaders who practice homosexual behavior. We will destroy patriotism in youth. By these means, the patriotism of youth for their capitalistic flag can be dulled to a point where they are no longer dangerous as soldiers. While this might require many decades to effect, capitalism's short-term view will never envision the lengths across which we can plan. The government has been working in our schools for many years to make students all work on the same page at the same time and all remain together, which will always be at a very low level. They do not require thinking, but merely regurgitating what the teachers say. The teachers say what the administrators want said, and the administrators are complying with the government curriculum. That is brainwashing at its best. We will take over your political system. It is not too much to hope that psychopolitical operatives would, in a country such as the United States, become the most intimate advisors to political figures, even to the point of advising the entirety of a political party as to its actions in an election. The long view is the important view. Are you wondering why Washington, D.C. never changes? That is why we feel so helpless and why so many voters feel disenfranchised, because it always seems that no matter whom we put in office, they turn out to do just what has always been done. We will take over your courts. Use the courts, use the judges, use the Constitution of the country, use its medical societies and its laws to further our ends. The ACLU has had willing accomplices in the judges of the Supreme Court to the destruction of the foundation on which America was built. In 1963, Engel versus Vitale outlawed prayer and the devotional reading of Scripture in public schools. Before that 1963 court, the court had not only refused to separate religious principles, but had relied on those principles when rendering its decisions. In Charleston versus Benjamin, they stated, "The day of moral virtue in which we live would, in an instant, if that standard were abolished, lapse into the dark and murky night of pagan immorality." In 1973, we allowed Roe v. Wade to stand, and 56 million babies, that is almost the population of the whole states of New York and California, have been sacrificed on the altar of choice. In 1973, the court found that the so-called right to personal privacy includes unrestricted access to abortion. The Freedom of Choice Act, which bars federal government regulation of abortion, was co-sponsored by Hillary Clinton. In 2000, the Supreme Court struck down Nebraska's law banning partial birth abortion. Thus, full-term, healthy babies who would otherwise be delivered kicking and squirming are killed as they come down the birth canal. It wasn't until 2007 that the court finally upheld a federal ban on the carnage. But where is the outrage when it was discovered that babies are being tortured as they are being killed and their body parts being sold to the highest bidder in America? In 2000, the court overruled a Texas law allowing high school students to pray at athletic events. In 2002, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that reciting the Pledge of Allegiance in public schools was an unconstitutional endorsement of religion because it contains the words "under God." In 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the display of the Ten Commandments in a state courthouse was unconstitutional and must be removed. The court defends the distribution of child pornography and files or supports lawsuits against laws to protect children from registered sex offenders. January 11, 2008, at a celebrity roast in Atlantic City, ESPN anchorwoman Dana Jacobson unleashed a profane tirade that blasphemed Jesus. She received a 1-week suspension. When Brittany McComb delivered the valedictory speech at Foothill High School in Henderson, Nevada, and mentioned the Lord, they shut off her microphone. The courts have declared if a student prays over his lunch, it is unconstitutional for him to pray aloud. In Alaska, students were told they could not use the word Christmas in school because it had the word Christ in it. In Virginia, a federal court ruled that a homosexual newspaper may be distributed on a high school campus, but religious newspapers may not. In Colorado, a music teacher was stopped from singing traditional Christmas carols in her class. And have you read about the mother in California who put Bible verses in her child's lunch and the whole school erupted? We will destroy your economy with taxation. The masses must at last come to believe that only excessive taxation of the rich can relieve them of the burdensome leisure class, and can thus be brought to accept such a thing as income tax. A Marxist principle smoothly slid into capitalistic framework in 1909 in the United States. This, even though the basic law of the United States forbade it, and even though communism at that time had been active only a few years in America. What were the only purposes to levy taxes until 1913? Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution grants the federal government of the United States its power of taxation While authorizing Congress to levy taxes, this clause permits the levying of taxes for two purposes only: to pay the debts of the United States and to provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But by 1913, the 16th Amendment was ratified, clear in its aim: the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on income from whatever source derived. We will hypnotize the people. The psychopolitical operative should pay particular attention to the forgetter mechanism aspect of hypnotism, which is to say, implantation in the unconscious mind. Sexual lust, masochism, and any other desirable perversion can be induced by pain, drug, hypnosis, and the benefit of psychopolitics. Researchers looked at children's brainwaves as they watched their favorite television programs. They assumed that the kids would be mentally involved with what they were watching. Instead, after just 2 or 3 minutes of the show, they sat back and stayed almost entirely in an alpha pattern. This meant that while they were watching, they were not reacting, not orienting, not focusing, just spaced out. A long-term study between 1977 and 1992 looked at 557 children from 5 countries and their TV viewing habits. The study found that early exposure to TV violence as children was a predictor of aggressive behavior later on. Documentation shows that television's erotic influence is so pervasive that it increases sexual activity in teens and younger children. The more television watched, the lower the age for that first sexual encounter. Researchers found that people who bought into TV depictions of marriage were not only less committed to their relationships overall, but also believed that they gave up more to be in their relationship. There have been numerous studies showing that when people watch shows with gay characters in them, they hold on to fewer negative gay prejudices. Under the influence of television, the frontal lobe cannot function at its full capacity. The brain does record information. Sight, memory, and emotions are all functioning well. Nevertheless, the brain no longer critically analyzes the information. Terrible scenes can be depicted, but the viewer tends only to laugh or shrug them off. Normally, if those kinds of events happened in real life, the individual would be appalled. Even this is changing as people become more desensitized through exposure. Hitler brainwashed his troops that way. We will deceive the parents. The role of the psychopolitical operator in this is very strong. He can instruct in an optimum situation the entire nation in how to handle children, and instruct them so that the children, given no control, given no real home, can run wildly about with no responsibility for their actions. When Dr. Spock told millions of mothers never to punish their children or they might bruise their psyches, he might have known, but those mothers had no clue, that they were fitting right into the communist plan. When you look at America's youth, you can see the effects of this well-designed plan to destroy America. Not allowed to pray in school, they are so rebellious that teachers and students are carrying guns to school. They could not have the 10 Commandments posted in the schools because that might influence them. Commandments that say not to lie, steal, or kill. They cannot have Bibles in classrooms but can get on computers and watch the most debasing pornography imaginable. We will destroy the family. The second loyalty is to the enemy's family unit, his parents and brothers and sisters. This is destroyed by making a family unit economically non-dependent, by lessening the value of marriage, by making an easiness of divorce, and by raising the children wherever possible by the state. The state is now educating your 3- and 4-year-old children. Soon they will attempt to get them at birth. The ACLU has as its goal getting the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn the Federal Defense of Marriage Act and to abolish marriage as we know it. The communists, through the ACLU, won when the Supreme Court said that gays could marry. The ACLU pushes for the supremacy of international and foreign law over the Constitution, especially regarding biblical views on sexual behavior. The ACLU is a communist organization started by communists, funded by communists, and run by communists. We will conquer America.
The end of war is the control of a conquered people. If a people can be conquered in the absence of war, the end of war will have been achieved without the destruction of war. A worthy goal, and the glory of communist conquest over the stupidity of the enemies of the people. The spread of communism has never been by force of battle, but by conquest of the mind. Now, by the time I had researched the author of this book, there was some information that made me wonder if this book was legitimate. I thought this might be some weird person who was angry or disgusted, so I'd better find out more. Then I researched more about Russia, communism, and the Communist Manifesto, and I knew for certain that it was all true. The communists have accomplished in America what they set out to do: destroy us from within. If our people do not wake up, they will all be blithely acceptant of the United Nations Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030, the blueprint for globalist government. That is why we must not give up. No more political correctness, no more listening to media moguls, depraved entertainers, and government officials that tell us what we can and cannot say. No more going along to get along. We have to start screaming loud enough and long enough so that they have to listen. We have to take our country back. Let's educate our families, our friends, our neighbors about socialism, communism, the United Nations agendas. They all have one goal in mind: to control all the people, all the resources, and all the wealth. They want equality for everyone but themselves. The Tea Party started a small revolution. You made a difference. Let's get back on that horse and keep on warning America. Our forefathers were willing to fight for liberty. Our military fought. It is time we fought.
Communism, socialism, UN agendas, they all have one goal: to control all the people, all the resources, all the wealth. They want equality for everyone but themselves. The Tea Party started a small revolution. You made a difference. Let's get back on that horse and keep on warning America. Our forefathers were willing to fight for liberty. Our military fought. It is time we fought. It is not too late. In World War II, England could have given up at Dunkirk, but Churchill called for fasting and prayer, and Hitler inexplicably called his generals back to the Canal Line, which gave the Allies time to rescue thousands of troops. Churchill called it the miracle of Dunkirk. In 1967, Israel could have given up when all the Arab forces were gathered around to destroy her, but with miracle after miracle, Israel won the Six-Day War. Let's do it for our children and our grandchildren. Let's push back Agenda 21. Let's push back the communist takeover. Let's tell them we know what they've been doing, and let's draw a line in the sand and say no more. You've fooled us long enough. Ronald Reagan said the most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." So, what is the answer to being able to keep our country free, healthy, and prosperous? Doctors are not the answer. We like to think they are, but doctors' mistakes are the third leading cause of death. Government is not the answer. Big government wants to control America and tax us out of existence. Politicians are not the answer. They are stealing from the American people without any shame. Our president is not the answer. He is giving away America, selling out to the highest bidder. Our courts are not the answer. They are filled with unjust judges who are making laws, which is unconstitutional for that body to do, that are destroying our civilization. They are ignoring the Constitution and the God who has blessed and protected us. Thomas Jefferson said, "A government big enough to give you everything you want is strong enough to take everything you have." I agree with Jay Leno, don't you? With hurricanes, tornadoes, fires out of control, mudslides, flooding, severe thunderstorms tearing up the country from one end to another, with the threat of bird flu, swine flu, and terrorist attacks, are we sure this is a good time to take God out of the Pledge of Allegiance?
The answer, of course, is God. Our only chance is to turn back to Him, because the Word says in 2 Chronicles 7:14, "If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, I will hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land." So who is going to pray? Who is going to fight for our children, our grandchildren, our nation? You. You are the key. You say, "But I am only one, and I am not important." Hitler was only one and he killed 6 million Jews. Madeleine Murray O'Hair was only one and she got prayer removed from our schools. Norma McCorvey was only one and her lawsuit Roe v. Wade led to the murder of 56 million babies. Christopher Columbus was only one and he found a new world. Harriet Beecher Stowe was only one and she influenced the start of the Civil War. Mother Teresa was only one and the whole world came to the slums of India to help her. Billy Graham was only one, but he determined to preach the gospel and preached it all over the world. It has always been one, usually going against everyone else, who has made a difference. I repeat, you hold the key to saving this country. You are the answer. You can make a difference. Rosa Parks said, "I have learned that in order to bring about change, you must not be afraid to take the first step. We will fail when we fail to try. Each and every one of us can make a difference." When I was in Africa, the children in public schools were singing "Jesus Loves Me." I was so surprised that when talking to an older group of students, I told them that Americans were no longer allowed to sing or talk about Jesus in our public schools. A young lady came to me afterward and said, "May I ask you 2 questions?" "Yes, of course," I replied. "Is that really true about America not allowing Jesus in schools?" "Yes, I'm sorry to say it is." "My other question," she said as she looked at me with amazement, "is, why did you let it happen?" Indeed, why did we let it happen? And is it too late now? Can we possibly turn back this country? I think we can, and I think it's up to you and me.
I leave you with these words from a pastor from the Revolutionary War, whose words I know are still true. Pastor Peter Muhlenberg said, "If you do not choose to be involved, if you do not fight to protect your liberties, there will soon be no liberties to protect."